Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I rise today, one day after the 6th anniversary of the terrorist attack at the Quebec City Mosque, I just want to acknowledge the loss that occurred on that day 6 years ago, the other 5 lives that have been taken from Islamophobic attacks in this country, and the work that we all need to do as parliamentarians and as Canadians to fight against hatred and intolerance, particularly Islamophobia. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to participate in today's debate, not just because it's the first day of the session, not just because I'm glad to be back in this chamber, glad to be back surrounded by parliamentarians seeking to advance the interests of our country and of our individual ridings, but because it actually reminded me of a conversation I had in 2019. That conversation, Mr. Speaker, was just on a given street in my riding in Roncesvalles Village, and I remember encountering a family. And it was election time, it was the 2019 election, and I was going door to door, as so many of us do every election period, and I was confronted with a family. And I had a very blunt conversation with the female lead of that family, the mother of the family. And she said to me, you know, you guys have done so much work, and you continue to do so much work about putting women at the forefront of things like international development assistance, about things like women's reproductive rights, about so many different initiatives, including a gender equal cabinet. But she said to me quite candidly that if you're really sincere about women and women's empowerment, you need to resolve childcare. And I said to her, that's fair. Like, I appreciate that criticism. She elaborated. She said, you can't really empower women's full participation in the workforce, whether that's as an entrepreneur, whether that's as a salaried employee in a public or private sector setting, unless you alleviate the disproportionate burden on women that relates to raising children. My riding has a lot of families, a lot of young families, a lot of young kids. And there's a lot of financial burden that goes along with raising those kids. When I was raising my kids who are now 8.5 and 12, the fees ranged per child between $1,500 and $1,800. Now it is quite common in Toronto to hear of fees that are $2,000 a month. What I'm pleased about today's debate and about the subject of what we're discussing is that finally, and yes, after many decades of discussions and thoughts about it, and we've heard about agreements that were scuttled at the last minute, etc., finally, this nation and this parliament is moving past the obstacles and implementing positive change. And I think that's critical. But I also want to acknowledge that it's not just individual constituents like mine who spoke to me in 2019 that provided an impetus, but there was another impetus, an impetus that has become just all too familiar to all of us, and that is the COVID-19 pandemic. Lest I remind you, Mr. Speaker, that it was literally families around the country that were dealing with the difficulties of all of a sudden shifting their workplace and their educational place for their children and effectively a substitute daycare all within the confines of their own home in a matter of weeks in March and April of 2020. And that's what faced Canadians. And all of a sudden, and I'm being very candid here, Mr. Speaker, I think all of a sudden it penetrated the brains, particularly of men in this country. What a challenge it is to try and have any sort of career or profession in a virtual setting or otherwise, and have kids running around you at all hours of the day, asking about their math homework, where's their history homework, you know, a geography lesson, you name it. It was a struggle. And that struggle became manifest, I think, for men like me in this country. And all of a sudden, the level of people's awareness, including my gender's awareness about the pressing need for a national child care program, became that much more acute. And what I like about what we're doing, Mr. Speaker, is that we are creating a system where you don't have to choose between building a career and raising a family. That's a false choice, Mr. Speaker. No one should ever be confronted with that. And thankfully, now we're moving towards a stage where one is not. And I think that is really, really important, Mr. Speaker. It comes with a large price tag. Massive social change, a massive social program is not inexpensive. We readily acknowledge that, Mr. Speaker. But when you prioritize families, when you prioritize children, when you prioritize the women who disproportionately share the burden of raising those children, what you do is you need to invest. And I think that's exactly what we did when we announced this program in our 2021 budget and a $30 billion price tag that would go along with it over the course of the next 5 years. That and what it is going to achieve is basically taking childcare that used to cost hundreds of dollars a day and projecting it to cost $10 a day on average across this country by 2026. In some provinces, we're very early adopters into this program, Mr. Speaker, because it's staggering in terms of its magnitude, in terms of what it can achieve. Some were a bit late to the game and maybe manipulated the electoral cycle for their own purposes, but I don't want to wade into that. We're now at a stage where 13 provinces and territories in this country, literally every square kilometre of this country, is covered by a childcare agreement. In my own province of Ontario, which I'm proud to call home, fees have been reduced on average by 50%. So something that might have cost you, doing the simple math, if you had your child in childcare for 10 months of the year, $17,000 to $20,000 has been cut in half, Mr. Speaker. Thousands of dollars are being saved by Ontarian families in my own riding of Parkdale High Park. That is staggering given the number one issue that we all hear when we go to door to door now, which is about the cost of living and the crisis of affordability. If you can return thousands of dollars to families in this country in one single fell swoop, that is reason enough on its own to get behind this kind of legislative initiative. What we are doing is reducing fees in every province and territory. British Columbia, Alberta, Newfoundland, and Labrador, PEI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and the NWT have all reduced their fees by an average of 50%. Saskatchewan, there's some speakers from Saskatchewan earlier in today's debate, has gone beyond that target and has already reached a 70% reduction on average in their fees. I was chatting earlier with the member from Winnipeg, the parliamentary secretary to the government House Leader. In his province of Manitoba, the fees are currently reduced by 30%, and they're on track to achieve a $10 a day childcare early in the new year. So this year, Manitobans will reach $10 a day on average for their childcare. In Yukon and in the province of Quebec, which is really at the forefront of all of this in terms of an initiative regionally many decades ago, they've had $10 a day childcare. Nunavut joined them in November of 2022, 3 years ahead of schedule. These are truly incredible results, Mr. Speaker, and they point to what we are doing. But I'll give you one statistic that I'm perhaps most proud of, Mr. Speaker. You heard in reference to the speech from the member from Newmarket, he talked about labour force participation. He talked about what Quebec had done where they were about 3 decades ago, about 4% below the national average of women's participation in the workforce, and now they're 4% above the Canadian average. What we know as of now, right now, Mr. Speaker, in the nascent days of this fledgling program, between women aged 25 to 54, 85% of those women are in the workforce right now. That is 9% ahead of our southern counterparts in the United States of America. That number is only going to grow, Mr. Speaker, which puts proof to the point that was made by my constituent in Parkdale High Park when she said to me, if you want to fully believe and allow for women's participation and their economic potential to be increased, you need to implement this kind of program. That's what we're working towards. But it's not just about the women, Mr. Speaker. It's about the children who are going to benefit from earlier formative education. Again, when I struggled with that grade 4 math class, such as it was, I realized my own limitations as an instructor. As great as parents are in this country, we don't have that formalized training and certification that early childhood educators have. So what are we doing to remedy this, Mr. Speaker? As part of that funding that I articulated, part of that funding, nearly $500 million, is dedicated to the training of early childhood educators, to their certification. So they're providing more and better and higher qualified training to our young people. That is a win-win, Mr. Speaker. It's great for the children's development. It's great for the early childhood instructors who have a better certification and higher wages as a result. Most importantly, it's better for the women who can now make not a false choice, but a real choice. Some may choose to stay at home. That is their choice. Some may choose to start that business. Some may choose to return to work. Some may choose to stay at work. And what we're doing in this one fell swoop, Mr. Speaker, is empowering and unlocking incredible economic potential on the part of literally half of our country. That is to the benefit of this country. That is to the benefit of our economic output. That is to the benefit of Canadians. And that is why I hope by legislating this initiative, we concretize it, we solidify it, and I dare say we make it permanent in this country on a go-forward basis. That's what C-35 is about. That's why I'm happy to stand in support of it. Merci beaucoup.